unfortunately, I got addicted. So since then, I can't remember how long ago it was, but since then, I've made 960 tweets. I now have about 165 followers. And how I got connected with Mark was, one day I sent out a tweet and said, come on you Ukippers, let's have some action. Well, of course, that day, Mark took me up, and all day he kept replying to everything. But I realised that the very people that I was trying to get at are the people that don't bother tweeting, like Ukip somewhere, can't remember, but hasn't tweeted since 2009. What's the point of that? If you are not going to be active in anything, don't bother. So anyway, I then looked at Mark's, I'm going to read what his profile is. Mark Vallance, ex-Conservative Party, 17 years a councillor, treasurer, and it says I'm from, Ukip, support our pubs, business owner, blogger, and proud crank and gadfly, Wincanton, Somerset. So all I want to know is, Mark, what took you so long?
Thank you very much, Vanessa. Well, I'll answer that straight away, because it is very, very pleasing for me to be here this lunchtime, and thank you very much indeed for everyone turning up. I'm sorry about the meals, but I hope everyone has eaten now, and as I say, it's very nice to be here in Bournemouth. A long time since I've been here. The last time was actually when I was working for a newspaper, the Evening Argus, down in Brighton, when I was for my sins. I am a Sussex lad by birth, but these days, having spent 5 years in France with my wife Fiona, who's around here somewhere, taking films at the moment, we came back after a short stint in the United States to come back to the UK. Now, the reason for being here, as Vanessa's pointed out, is that my background is that from about the age of 16, I joined Young Conservatives. I've always been interested in politics, ever since that awful little man with a pipe called Harold Wilson, which I suspect most of you may recall, won a general election in 1964 and then won a big majority in 1966. My parents have never been politically minded. My father was always a Tory, but never active. He had polio, so that restricted him somewhat. My mother's side were in fact staunch socialist. In fact, my grandfather, I would say, was a Marxist, if anything. But never mind. For some reason, I turned out to be a Tory. I think it was Enoch Powell who said, you don't become a Tory, you're born one. Well, maybe there's some degree of truth to that. Because I suspect, looking around here, from speaking to some of you people, I think a lot of you are Conservatives, or had been previously voting Conservative, should I say, and are now have come over, like myself, in the light, and are now Ukip. So it's a great pleasure to be here, as I say, this afternoon, and to give you a bit of a background as to how I come to be standing here talking to you now. Well, like I say, I got very active as a member of the Conservative Party, as a Conservative. I used to attend council meetings. One of the things which really got me going basically was letter writing. I used to write to the local press letters, and I started challenging Labour solidly because I was in Crawley, in Sussex. Crawley is a Tory seat these days, since 2010, but it had been actually run as a borough council by Labour, very staunchly so. And I saw some of our people had stood there, and I got involved in local elections, more often than not on the losing side, unfortunately. And but eventually, at the ripe age of just 22, actually, I was elected as a Tory councillor for Pound Hill Ward in Crawley, and I knocked out the Labour mayor that year. So I was not particularly very popular. And that time, I also in 1977 stood as a Tory county councillor, and after 3 recounts, I actually failed to win a county seat. But a lot of people were saying to me, oh, well, this guy's going to be the potentially future Tory MP for Crawley, as and when, because in those days we were part of Horsham Crawley constituency. In any case, come back to more to today, really. It was when, in fact, about Britain coming in and joining the EEC, or the EU as we call it now, Common Market. I can remember as a young Tory being at Hickstead down in Sussex, and there was Edward Heath, the late Edward Heath, our former Prime Minister, not the most popular amongst those of us more on the right, shall we say. The late John Davis, but there was Geoffrey Rippon, there was Sir Geoffrey Howe, as he was then, at this meeting at Hickstead, and they were all going on saying how wonderful the EU was going to be. And of course we know the story, I won't go over old things that we know about. We eventually signed the ratification to join the EU. But I've never ever liked it, and I never have done. And I think as I watch things progress on, in those early days, we weren't sort of being dominated, because today, of course, something like about 75% of the laws that we have now are instigated from the EU, from Brussels and Strasbourg. They're not from our Parliament, and that's the one thing that really is kicked home with me. I think it's diabolical that we today, our own Parliament, our own mother Parliament, does not pass the laws that we want to have and to control us as a nation, and we need our sovereignty back. And that is one of the reasons why I decided, after reading the Maastricht Treaty, along with people like Nigel Farage and other various people, that sort of turn their minds round that we are in fact on the wrong side of things. Now, don't get me wrong, I like Europe. I lived in France with my wife for 5 years. I like France. I like French people. But I don't want them, all of the Germans, to be telling me, or the Dutch or anyone else, how and what we should be doing here. Anymore, to be perfectly honest, and no disrespect to any Welsh or Scots here, those people dictating their laws onto us when we don't have any control over their Parliament either. So, after giving lots of thought about politics, come to about October of last year, I decided that the Conservative Party under David Cameron was going in a somewhat different direction from the Conservative Party as a Thatcherite, and I was one of Mrs. Margaret Thatcher's foot soldiers, going in an opposite direction. I used to be a former member of the Monday Club. I don't know if anyone's heard of the Monday Club, but it was a right-wing pressure group of Tory backbenchers. Some of them have decided to go elsewhere, but it's now somewhat defunct. But I'm very much active into that sort of thing. And the Way Forward and various other right-wing pressure groups within the Conservative Party. But as things progressed on, and certainly we've had Ian Duncan Smith, Mr. Hague and Ian Duncan Smith, and these people have been good leaders, but none of us brought us to the great climax of being in control of government. And then of course come along Mr. Cameron, and I have to say I don't like Mr. Cameron. He just doesn't do anything for me. And in fact he's one of the Bullington boys, he's one of the toffs, and I'm afraid to say, as Nigel Farage would say, is one of the problems of what we face today. It's not just the EU, it's the people that are sitting in that Parliament up there at Westminster.
Traitors.
Traitors, yes, absolutely, sir.